Hey, everybody, I'm Tony Buffum, co-founder and chief strategy officer of Human Cloud. At Human Cloud, we endeavor to connect businesses and enterprises with the marketplace talent and solutions that will make them the best they can be. And to that end, I'm talking today with Yuri because we've recently expanded what we do in Human Cloud to incorporate more and more agentic AI capabilities. Why? Because how could we not? This is as we all know, the top focus for so many organizations. But it doesn't stop with just finding a tool or solution or platform off the shelf that you can drop in your organization. We know it's not that easy. The real challenge is building that AI skill set within the organization. Frankly, I hear all the time about upskilling and we need to bring our talent along with us. The truth is, I don't see it happen that much besides giving people a sandbox to play in and, maybe they kind of figure it out in their own time. So that's what makes me really excited to talk to Yuri today because we've had a conversation before. We've met. I know what we're going to talk about today. And I know that when you hear about it, you're really going to find it exciting, very interesting, and probably want to get involved. And hang on for the full call conversation because we'll tell you how to learn more by the end of the discussion. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Yuri Kruman. Yuri, let's start by before we get into all the current stuff, let's go back in time. Tell me a little bit about your background that's led you to this point, because I think it's a really great diversified history that certainly informs what you're doing today.
First of all, Tony, it's wonderful to speak with you. It's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely.
Bit about my background, so buckle up. All jokes aside, I guess I've had something like 10 careers and running. I'll try to make sense of this in a reasonable time frame. So I started out in something so wildly different, it's almost hilarious. I started out in academic neuroscience. So after college, I came to New York to do a PhD in neuroscience at NYU, and I lasted all of a year because I like my finger in 10 different soups, and that's just not what a PhD is. So I left. I was more or less politely told that, look, great kid, but like, what are you doing here? This is not for you. So I went and did paralegal work. I'm a good immigrant kid. I need to show that I'm doing something, not twiddling my thumbs, right? So I did a little bit of sales. I did some paralegal work, something at Pfizer, something at this big law firm, that big law firm. I applied to law school. Yes, I did the thing. I have the debt to prove it. I have the receipts, the wrong kind. But while I was in law school, I did all kinds of different internships, everything from insurance defense litigation. I was in a personal injury firm. I was the associate of the one guy. I even got onto Russian TV in a commercial somehow where they dubbed my voice. Crazy stories. Anyway, so 2009 comes around and, there are no jobs. And here I am with this literally pretty much useless law degree and about well into the six figures in terms of debt. And I have to do something, right? I just met my now wife, living in New York. So what do? Like a good smart kid, I try to get my way into finance. And, I had a little tiny internship in a hedge fund when everything was going south. So that was my way into finance. And, I got a project at a hedge fund and it looks really great, but the project ends and everything crashes, right? Mm. How do I pay for rent? All this stuff. Meanwhile, I get married, we have our first kid. Again, on paper, it looks great. I'm working at Bank of America. Huzzah, right? But again, this kind of drop off. So eventually I make my way into startups, tech startups. And, I always had an interest in healthcare. My mom is, kind of biomedical scientist. So I grew up with this stuff. Two grandparents were doctors. I get into healthcare and I make my way into a series of 3 different startups, one after the other. In one of them, I'm doing essentially finance and operations, which is not at all my thing. Okay, fast learning curve, great. I burn out completely from there. I make my way into the next one. I talked my way into a product management job where I'm working with guys that are like, from Harvard Business School, Stanford, and here I am. Like, what is this guy doing here? Then, from there, I made my way into a consulting firm, and, so on and so forth. Eventually, I ended up building my own thing, right? And I've done elements, might be asking, what does this have to do with HR? So in one of the startups, okay, you're the, I don't know, director of special projects. Why don't you find us some great talent? Okay, I mean, sure. Let me go on my LinkedIn, find some people in my network, message them, see what happens. And actually, some great people showed up, and we ended up hiring some of them. I was like, okay, I mean, that's cool. I don't know if I really want to do recruiting, but like, okay, apparently this is interesting. So I left all the startups, and again, I burned out completely. It was, a lot of Kool-Aid that I drank, and no thanks. So I started doing little projects and talked my way into one where, I don't know, the CEO of a cookie company in Brooklyn was having issues with HR. And I'm like, well, I can probably help you with that. So I rolled him over from, I don't know, ADP to JustWorks. And another one was, build a learning and development program. Another one is like, can you help us with performance management? I just always said yes, right? Sometimes you just say yes because, you got to put bread on the table.
Yeah.
So one thing led to another, and, a recruiter reaches out, hey, we're recruiting for a head of HR role in middle of New Jersey, hour and a half drive. I said yes. Of course I said yes, right? Because that's a great opportunity. I mean, out of nowhere with my like weird background, awesome. And that was in January 2020. And we all know what happened in March, right? First of all, we had our third kid. I was born during the first few days of COVID. Of course, I'm commuting every day to this crazy job in the middle of New Jersey, and I'm loving it. I'm actually sincerely loving it. It was such a great job. But the guys had no clue about what's coming. And I'm like, you don't have to be a brilliant virologist to understand that your company is going to shut down completely. This is not a 2-week thing. Sadly, I was right. I've been a Cassandra throughout a lot of my life, and people don't like Cassandra, but that's life. So I, essentially got other projects where I was, again, kind of the interim head of HR or fractional. Again, at this point, it doesn't matter. And I've seen what it is to build something from scratch in terms of strategic HR, or build a learning and development program from scratch. I have my own stuff that I've put together in books. I've always been a content guy, I have my own newsletter, podcast, all kinds of different things. So, with all this strange portfolio of projects and experiences, I basically arrived at a point where HR consulting is kind of, it's petering out because everyone's fractional suddenly, and there's massive supply and there's not always great demand. Now we have this whole body slam of AI. And of course, AI means a lot of things to different people, but we're going to talk about this, the numbers, because the numbers are, I don't want to be alarmist, right? I'm not an alarmist by nature, but I'm a Cassandra. So that's how I got into AI. So about the last, 3, almost 4 years, of course, I jumped on the ChatGPT wagon, and I'm like, okay, there's a lot more to this. And in case it's not clear yet, I'm a bit ADHD. So for someone like myself, when you get this, massive power to suddenly do all these things, I mean, you jump on it, right? And that led me to do AI training projects for the likes of Meta and Microsoft and OpenAI. Eventually, I started using, these kind of agentic superpowers, right? And building workflows and all of that for things that are not even just HR. We'll talk about that a little bit, but that's how I got into this kind of interesting space where anything's possible.
I'm glad that we talked about that because you're right. It feels like kind of an ADHD career, and also quite the roller coaster. But it's so diverse, and you've had your thumb in so many different functions, so much different experience with companies of all sizes in all different kinds of industries. And so as much as that seems like it's a extremely varied and maybe to some people a little bit hectic, it's so great in how it informs where you are now because of all that you've seen and experienced and understanding what each of these different parts of the business and different industries goes through. Certainly as we now have this new technology that's also very much a game changer, arguably a skill leveler, if you know how to use it. It could be the opposite if you don't, which is, I think, exactly where you're coming from. It's such an opportunity. And all of that really informs that, or that context really informs what you've created now. So let's now shift to what we first kicked off talking about, which is the opposite of AI being a great leveler. It's the reality of it creating a really massive AI wage gap, which is the way you put it. Tell us a little bit about how you kind of, for lack of a better term, discovered this AI wage gap and how you define it.
Yeah, so great question. Of course, in the grand old ADHD tradition and having the power of AI, one day I just said, you know what? Okay, I have so many different things that I've done. I have so many different projects. And you know what? AI, Perplexity in this case, right? One of my favorite tools, helped me make sense of my background. Here, I uploaded all these different documents, whether that's work product, whether that's, let's say something from my podcast or the articles that I've written or my books. I actually just uploaded, the book files. And I said, can you help me make sense of this? Because I mean, I've had coaching and I'm a coach myself. And, it's always the cobbler has the worst shoes kind of situation, right? With ADHD. So for me, literally Perplexity crunched all my stuff that I gave it. And it said, you know what? It looks like basically you're focused on, with some elaboration, some massaging, you kind of have to know how to do it. It gave me this idea that there's an AI wage gap. AI wage gap. Wow, that's interesting, right? Because we always talk about there's a gender pay gap, there's all kinds of different things, right? All kinds of pay gaps. But when I looked at the numbers, I said, okay, well, this is already much bigger than any of those other gaps that we talk about. And, those are bad enough. We know that the systemic problems that exist within the workforce and the US might be a light version of what happens in other countries. But anyway, so looking at the numbers, according to PwC, right? So again, Perplexity made this beautiful report for me. I kind of knew how to pull the right levers and make sure that it gives me the most rigorous sources, ideally from, let's say, Bureau of Labor Statistics and
Sure.
a company called Revelio Labs, which kind of is
Yeah.
creating its own things on that subject. Give me the stuff from the Big Four, Big Five, whatever have you. Paint me a picture. Show me what's really going on with this supposed AI wage gap. And PwC, which crunched something like 6 billion job postings, found that this AI wage gap already at the beginning of this year is 56%. 56%. That's not 10, that's not 20, 56. Yeah. Okay, some others are saying, okay, they crunched maybe fewer job listings, it's 30, it's 20. It's massive already. And we know that this is only the beginning of this trend. So I didn't write on the wall, right? This isn't me and my alarmist imagination or something, right? This is from far across the board what is happening, looking at just job listings. Okay, so this is the genesis of what I realized I'm already doing from before, right? Meaning as a coach, as a head of HR, I'm trying to make sure that people can have the best conditions in order to do their life's best work, ideally in the here and now, not somewhere else. Part of that is making sure they have the best opportunities and the best tools to do their work, plus they have all the best conditions under which to do said work. And all of this, because, a lot of those things are very soft and fuzzy and, warm and all that stuff. But when you put hard numbers to them, and this is the structure of the economy, it's a very different beast. So literally, I, ate my proverbial dog food using AI to help me figure out what it is that I'm doing in the most concrete terms and how to describe it and how to build a brand around it and all of that.
So tell me, I mean, it's kind of implied, but tell me, how do you define the AI wage gap? Is it, I'll just let you do it. Tell me, like, how do you put that into terms that we can understand? And then what can people do about it besides just do the same thing you did, jump into these tools and ask it for help?
Yeah, I would not say that my path is terribly recommended because it's all over like this, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
don't try this at home, folks. What is the AI wage gap? Excellent question. So first of all, I think almost everyone listening has certainly not just dabbled with, I don't know, ChatGPT or Claude or something else. there's a point where every one of us starts drinking from the fire hose. There's, 10, 20, 50 new tools every week. And there's always a freemium version, and you dive in there and you kind of compare, and eventually you say, you know what, I don't have time for this. I don't know. I'll just sort of keep it on the side. Maybe I'll use it. Maybe I won't. Maybe someone will push me to do it at work, or maybe I'll get a, pro subscription. The AI wage gap is saying, look, the difference in wages and salary between people that just dabble and kind of hope for the best and those that can actually concretely use AI, whatever the tool is, in order to build AI workflows, in order to build agents. Literally things that can do a lot of that very manual, boring, frankly, work. And we know that in HR, if you're talking about lower levels, it's pushing 50% of that manual work, which is very easily automatable, right? And how do I know? Well, I've done it. I think everyone listening has done it at some point. So not only it's boring, it's like it bogs you down and not being able to do the really interesting strategic work, which actually makes the biggest difference. So that's what we talk about when we say AI wage gap. Can you actually truly build something using AI in order to fundamentally propel your work to a totally different level and add massive value in your corporate environment, whether that means people management, project management, program management, dealing with your board, what have you, right? All of these things are the value that you add as a CHRO, VP of HR.
Yeah, I think this is the point in our conversation where listeners will relate to the former, the passive user that dabbles and isn't quite sure how this scales in their role. And they're hearing that and they start to freak out. They go, okay, well, so there's people already doing it and using it. They're making a lot more money. Maybe, certainly people in headlines already highlight fears around being replaced. So certainly that's a concern. That's not what you're describing. What you're describing is, aside from being replaced, there's opportunities to make significantly more, earn more money, and do more. And to your final point, do more that's really value added, that's aligned with your own intrinsic motivation, and do less that's monotonous and routine and can easily be automated. Those activities that, as leaders, at least as leaders, we don't want to be bogged down with. But even just as HR practitioners, most people that want to get in HR, it's like, I like people. Maybe that's not everything, but what's
I
important
like
is
Claude, just Claude.
they want to influence outcomes in the organization. They want to spend time getting to know the organization, the workforce, the community, and help guide the direction of the company. And all of that can take a lot of time. And it's usually what people are motivated around. When 50%, maybe even more of your time is bogged down by all of that workflow, administrative, routine, or very simple, Q&A and blocking and tackling, you just can't be as impactful as you like. So they're hearing this, I think, and going, man, yeah, I'd like that, but I'm not that. And I'm really worried that it's going to pass me by. How do they close the gap for themselves? I think answering that question gets into what you've developed that I think is really exciting and a great opportunity for a lot of our listeners.
Great question. Let me paint two different pictures, I think, to illustrate the difference. So the first is, okay, these are concrete examples, right? So I went to Wharton to their CHRO program. This is the end of last year. I gave a class on AI and HR, right? And a lot of very highly placed people, CHROs in Fortune 500 companies. These are very sophisticated people. They can present all kinds of things before the board, and they really know what's happening, right? And I came in there, and it's not that I got a lot of blank stares. I realized later, after asking questions from the admins, that I was the only one who was doing something wildly different from the traditional CHRO curriculum in that program. And I was like, okay, well, we're already how far into this process? About 2.5, 3 years of using AI, and it's still this kind of mystery. What is this? How much is this going to impact my work? Well, I'm not sure sort of what to do. Am I supposed to build? Am I supposed to dabble? Am I supposed to enable? There's talk of AI transformation. Is that, code for everyone's getting fired? What does that mean, right? So the first thing is basically a disconnection from reality, in the sense that usually it sounds like we're getting fired and they're preparing for, the PR. But what it means in practice, when I went and spoke to some of those CHROs one-on-one after the class, I kept getting the same feedback. It's like, well, I love this stuff. It's super interesting, but I don't have the budget. I don't know what's happening here. And this is at very progressive firms. This is not at, some kind of old school companies. And the other side is, okay, well, you talk to some people in the industry who are kind of out of that operator mind frame, meaning they're holding on for dear life and kind of hoping for the best and saying the right things, and who knows what will happen, right? The other side is, okay, we have moved from operator to founder, and that founder is someone who says, okay, again, not everyone has this luxury, it's not something that's natural to everyone, but let's say people go from CHRO to I'm a fractional CHRO. I'm an interim, whatever the iteration is. Plus, I want to build a personal brand. Plus, I want to build things for my consulting clients that I now am finding, right, based on my connections, my network. So what do I deliver to them? It can't just be any longer the same HR consulting. It can't just be the same coaching. It's AI transformation. But what is the gap? The gap between, okay, let's implement some tools, let's plug in the fire hose and hope something happens, to, okay, you know what? I am actually not just going to read a million newsletters and try all these tools. I'm going to actually maybe focus on one or two tools. Maybe Claude is actually more than enough. Right? Maybe I'm going to jump over this whole thing about, oh no, how does prompting work? Or I don't know, how does AI training work? I'm going to jump over it and I'm just going to get into it. I'm going to have the chutzpah. I think this is the main ingredient missing from the equation. Most people, because they're used to, okay, there's a corporate element. People in corporate always sort of like wait and plan and hope. But there's also the element of what is HR? HR is last on board and first off. It's usually got the least budget. There's no voice. It's always in this kind of, corner hoping for the best, which is, we all know it's an absolute shame. If you know how to manage people, if you know how to empower them, that's why you went into this field. If you had the right resources, then you should be able to lead that AI transformation, right? But the transformation is not, it's not an IT thing. It's not a finance thing, of course, after the bills get paid. This is actually a fundamental thing. I am whoever I am with all my background. I just like to build. I like to play. At some part of me is still a kid, and I like to play. I like to see what happens if I dare, God forbid I dare, to build something that I actually need myself.
Yeah.
Right? Some kind of, I don't know, HR policy chatbot, which automatically updates from open source places, databases, right? And that actually is an AI agent. So suddenly I'm like, wow, you know what? If I can build this thing, and I just had the chutzpah, and I'm not a coder. God knows I'm not a coder. I'm not a product guy. I mean, I lasted all of a few months pretending. Okay. Suddenly I can build essentially whole cloth AI agents that run on their own, connected to my mailbox, my Gmail, my Slack, my Google Drive. And it actually works. It's almost miraculous, but it's not, right? You follow the process. Claude leads you through it. You have 3 things running in your tabs, in your 3 tabs. It's actually not rocket science. It's actually really accessible. So that's the picture. Those are the 2 scenarios.
Yeah, I think it's so powerful and the potential is so great that the perception is that the hurdle to get access to that, to really effectively do it, is really high. It's going to take a lot of investment of my time. It's going to be really risky and dangerous for the organization. So just like you described, I've talked to a lot of executives at big companies, And there's this very much this, well, we're creating this sandbox so that people can play in a safe place that doesn't risk our IP or things like that, and they can test things out. I don't feel like there's a lot of training other than to say we've made training available, but we're not pushing the training on people because we want them to adapt to it on their own. It seems like the reality is that at an organizational strategic level and at an individual level in a lot of enterprises, it's all, this feels really scary. It feels like a lot. It feels too different. It's going to require a lot of change, and the training versus what I'm used to doing and how you can do it's too great. And oh, by the way, I hear about lawsuits related to agents, and selection tools, and it feels super risky too. So I'll wait and see, which I feel like anytime when we're talking about technology and wait and see creeps into the dialogue, that just sounds like bad news. Like we know better. And I like the way you describe HR in general, which is a highly reactive function.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening in the business? How do we need to help the organization adapt and make changes? And okay, what's that? Tell us what we need to do next versus being proactive. I think any operator in HR loves the idea of being proactive, but they don't know how to get positive control so they can actually be proactive, whether it's staffing, whether it's influencing the strategy, whether it's workforce planning. Even when they start to get into proactive motions, it quickly becomes reactive, either due to external factors or just the daily grind catching up with them. So that perception is, I think, what holds a lot of folks back. And I think there isn't an obvious path to how do I close that gap versus
Mm-hmm.
just I have to go figure it out on my own. And that's what I think is really exciting about what you developed is I think you've created something that can help them along that journey.
Yeah, Tony, you bring up some great points here. First of all, you're right. The gap in perception is massive, right, between what people think about and what is possible and what they're allowed to do. Really, we know that there's a massive disconnect. It's a communication issue. The other part is classical learning and development issues. If you think about what is learning and development, it's not some program or course you launch because if it doesn't count in performance, nobody does it. It's
Yeah,
just an
right.
extra commitment. Right. So that's number one. Number two, within the corporate setting, either what often happens in practice. Okay, you launch it to your, I don't know, junior managers. Oh, great. Right. But no one wants to coach them. So all of that great stuff that you teach them suddenly is useless. Maybe they get their little certificate for LinkedIn. Maybe, they argue that they should be promoted. It's very small scale change. Here we're talking about something fundamentally different. We're saying that, look, you're a human. You see the writing on the wall. You know that HR will not stay the same, period. It's, again, not my alarmism. This is not
Totally
perception.
agree.
It's already happening. It's there.
Already. Yeah.
And we're first off the wagon. So again, either you see what that is and you say, you know what, this actually doesn't need to be that scary because you're not jumping off a horse into a car, right? You're not saying, oh, you know what, I'm jumping from a car into a plane. It's not that massive of a difference. Okay. You're actually saying, you know what, I maybe want my own sandbox. And it's not about sandbox. I have problems, right? I have problems like any other person. I have to manage my family, my kids, war stuff,
Yeah.
work stuff, whatever, right? All of us have those things. And if, so many people have already figured out doesn't mean they know everything or they can code things whole cloth, but at least they know what to focus on. This is the hardest thing. It's how to tune out all the things that maybe either don't matter anymore. It's like saying, okay, when cell phones were introduced to Africa, right, or to rural India, they kind of skipped over a lot of those steps of evolution, right? There's the telegraph, there's the power lines, all of that stuff, right? A lot of that was just skipped wholesale. And now those farmers in Africa, rural India, they get texts that remind them, pay this or it's time to harvest or whatever, right? So that's also possible. You don't have to go through all the many stages and
Yeah.
learn every little thing, especially when others have done it already. So the key is to be in an environment where it's safe. You're with your peers and you're learning from them as much as you're learning for yourself. You don't need 50 tools. You don't even need 20 or 10. I mainly use two on a daily basis, literally Perplexity and Claude. Sometimes Gamma, sometimes, Quillbot, etc. And I've been through AI testing and AI subject matter expertise work, and great, awesome. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to. All you have to do is just remember that you're a curious being. You want to solve specific problems. Maybe you don't have $15,000 to pay for, I don't know, an ATS. Maybe you want to build it yourself, see what happens. Turns out it's not that complicated, right?
Yeah.
You just tell it, hey, can you mirror the features of Greenhouse? And it does most of the work for you. I think this is where kind of bottom up and top down meet. It's not actually that complicated. You can actually do this in a few hours or days. I mean, a couple weeks, but you're saving tens of thousands of dollars just for yourself that you don't have because, you're not controlling the purse strings. Suddenly something opens up and you're like, wow, you know what? I actually can build anything. And I can not only build it, that's beautiful, that's lovely. I can commercialize it. I can actually ask Claude, can you build me something that's commercial quality with the UI UX of this tool that I really like, with the features of this tool that I have always enjoyed when someone else is paying for it? Suddenly you find yourself like, I literally, I open up Claude every morning. I have it building 5 different things. There's a book chatbot. There's a career beast mode app. There is a CRM that's AI driven, right, for one of my other projects. A couple other things. And I just say, hey, keep building, right? If there's a roadblock, tell me how to fix it. It's not rocket science. I'm not a coder, but I go fix it. It keeps building. That's it. It's reality. This is reality. This is not some futuristic whatever.
Yeah. I love to, I mean, that should be a really attractive carrot that you just hung out there, which is not only taking the idea and making it possible, but even commercializing it. Because I know I've met, a handful of HR leaders that have developed tools that have been really successful with that, because they're so close to the need and the demand and the problem. And they're smart enough to bridge the solution in a way that others can use it. And I know there's so many HR leaders that see those things every day and are like, man, if I could just kind of ideate to a point where I can come up with a solution, I bet other people could use it. And I could even sell that. And what I think is really great about your approach is this is something people can certainly use in enterprises, but it's also, hey, it kind of starts with that fractional mentality. As a fractional or independent HR resource, you could make tools that'll make you so much more effective and frankly attractive to an organization that's going through or needs this kind of support, that you can, help individuals become better contributors, better marketers of their business, better, just more successful. But it's because they're using these tools, and it gets us all the way back to the beginning, which is independent contractors, consultants, etc., that aren't using these tools are really going to struggle, especially in comparison to those that can assess an organization, have used these tools before, can leverage them in helping an organization through a transformation and solving whatever other problems they have. So I think that's all really exciting. And there's a couple things that I think people can explore to learn more about how they can close that gap. The first is your leverage brief. Tell me a little bit about that. The first one that you have out and what that's going to look like down the line.
Yeah. So essentially, this is a stack of projects that fit hand in hand. Okay. So the entire thing, it's portfolio leverage. So if you look at what this is, again, you're going from operator. You got to start with operator. You have your day job, you have your family to support. It's not like, the cape comes off and here I am. It doesn't work like that, right? Again, there are all sorts of complicating factors, but you have to start with operator. What are my actual daily problems where I have those unique insights that nobody else does? Okay. And then, yeah, you know what? I'm sure that other people like myself CHROs, VPs of HR in similar companies, different companies, they're also suffering from the same issues. You can go do market research. You can interview them on a podcast. You can interview them for a book, for an article, for your newsletter, right? And essentially that becomes what I'm doing with Leverage Brief. That's the newsletter. The newsletter is saying, okay, let's put an end to this thinking that there's some superhero complex involved. Like, oh, look, one of us made it out. No, I'm nothing special. It's not about ADHD. It's not about expensive tools. This is $20 a month that you've never seen any kind of value close to this for 20 bucks a month, 40 bucks a month, 2 tools. Okay. We're talking about doing something while you have some revenue coming in, whether from your day job or some other project, right? This is totally normal these days. There's nothing unusual here. So you create that portfolio where you're the fractional person, you're the subject matter expert, you do advisory work. You know what? Most likely you have your newsletter, just like me, right? And you monetize that. Maybe you write articles. The articles have become a book. Your interviews on a podcast become your interviews for the book. And you can leverage all of this. You can build a personal brand while you're dabbling, and your dabbling becomes building. You don't need to dabble anymore. You have permission. You don't need my permission, but you have it, please. Right? You start building things, solving problems for yourself. Then you do those same solutions for clients. You build a practice, right? You don't need that day job eventually, but you got to manage the transition. There has to be a real operating system for how to do this, plus the money operating system for how do I actually manage that transition. That's what a lot of people are scared of because they don't see those pieces anywhere. It's just rah prompting, rah agents, workflows. Oh, what is that? Okay, let's get real. This is how you bridge that gap from you're a CHRO holding on for dear life to you're in control of your own situation.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you get from here to there? What are the tools? What are the projects? Okay, how do you build? Give me some examples. How do I build a portfolio of tools, workflows, agents that I can sell? Because the idea is commercialize it. Why not? You're solving a real problem for real people. Okay? This isn't complicated. It's not hard to get an LLC. It's not hard to sign up for Stripe. It's not complicated to follow really simple instructions from Claude. Just don't be afraid. That's it. That's the main thing. Plus, follow an operating system. Set up your money situation so you have some real bridge. You're on the earth, right? And suddenly you're off and running. You have your own brand. You have your own ICP, and you follow the classic prescription for building your own consulting, coaching. Maybe you sell your SaaS. God bless. It's real. This is real. I'm not some magic example. There are tens of thousands, probably more than that, people actually doing this, plus making a lot more money than they were in their day job.
Well, and we talked about the newsletter. That's a great way for them to get some information about this and stay on top of what's evolving and hear from you with recommendations. But you keep mentioning this AI operating system for your career, for your personal portfolio and career. And that's really what you do you can help people with that through Forward Achieve. So tell us a little bit about Forward Achieve and what you aim to help people accomplish and how they can engage with you to create their AI operating system.
Great question. So Forward Achieve is a venture studio that I'm partnering with to deliver a cohort course specifically for CHROs, VPs of HR, people in this exact situation where they know that they need to suddenly add a lot more value through their job, right? By building with AI, but maybe they don't know where to start, or again, there's fear. So we go from fear to what is that path? What are the stops along the way? What do I really need to know? What do I not need to know? What can I more or less skip over because it's irrelevant? By now, it's, I can teach you all the great prompting that I've learned, but that's largely beside the point. That's not really what matters. You need to generate your own language. So it could be a Claude MD file. And then you have something with which to build. Whatever you build, it already inculcates who you are, your style, what you care about, your standards, whatever collateral you've produced, right? And you can start already much farther down the road without having to recreate all of that from scratch each time, right? That already makes you feel like, wow, okay, I can have momentum more quickly. But everybody needs a guide. I've had a lot of guides along the way, and I've learned what really works, and I've tested it. So in a way, I'm someone who can teach others to do the same without all the mistakes, without all the
Sure. Yeah.
wasting of time and going down the wrong pathway. So we're doing a cohort course specifically for heads of HR and similar roles to get them in that same mind frame, right? Something more like toward founder mode. But at the very least, they can go back to their day job and say, you know what? Wow, I feel like I can move mountains now.
Yeah. And I like that it gives people kind of the opportunity to plant that seed of what's possible.
Yep.
Because I think, to your point, a lot of listeners do feel like, okay, this is all really exciting and interesting, but where do I start? And they need a little bit of boost, like a gentle nudge, and someone that can describe the horizon so they know where they're heading. And with that, then with the tools of, well, how do you use them, and just breaking down those barriers of fear or trepidation, allow people to really embrace this and start playing like you described earlier. At a minimum, just that experience of playing. Yeah, I have these things I wish I could do. It feels like there's a better way. If I could just create it myself, all of a sudden that's a domino that falls along the path of that exploration and confidence building. That not only is this not scary, it's actually really exciting and it's empowering.
The key piece is you gain a portfolio from the process, not a portfolio of, a kid drawing in kindergarten, but real things that really work that you can actually go and commercialize with a few tweaks, not by paying a developer tens of thousands of dollars, because God knows that's often very ineffective. Do it yourself, right? You have that Claude subscription. I mean, okay, worst case, $100 a month. You get the max and you get much more compute. But you're on your way. You have no barriers. The barriers are mostly up here.
So tell our listeners as we wrap up, what are the best ways for them to get in touch with you, to subscribe to the newsletter, to learn about this or apply for the cohort? All things I recommend they do. How do you recommend they get started?
I appreciate it. So again, I think the simplest way to do this is if you want to learn about AI wage gap and really dig into that, AIwagegap.com. Really straightforward.
Pretty
Okay. So you have the
straightforward.
full
Yeah.
background. You really feel like, okay, this is real. This is not some hype. Number two, if you want to get on the newsletter, and again, you'll have those things in your inbox at least once a week on Sunday, where you have what I'm building, what I've learned, specific roles that companies are recruiting for, including those like OpenAI, Microsoft, Meta, etc. Right, where you can start small without really any background in AI whatsoever, get paid to learn, often get paid actually quite decent money, something even comparable to the day job. Okay, you're learning how prompting works, how rubrics work. You don't need to learn that from me or somebody else. You can, but you also, why not get paid for it? Do it in a few extra hours, whatever you have available during the week. It's asynchronous. No one's watching over you, to make sure you get things done by a certain hour. Then you can sign up for the cohort course if this is something that's a good fit for you. We'll have the link in the show notes. So as I mentioned, I'm working with a venture studio so we can really get this out and make first HR people, L&D people comfortable with this premise, and then it'll be other executives as well, because a lot of them have the same barriers. And that's really it. If you want to get in touch, absolutely feel free. I'm on LinkedIn, Yuri Kruman. You have my name. You can get in touch with me directly, yurikruman@gmail. Be in touch. This is a really exciting journey. I'm always excited to share.
It is really exciting because, as you describe, HR is the last on, first off. And, for years I've presented around HR's kind of technology gap. And there's a really interesting study that showed HR's progress in digital transformation. This is before we even started talking about AI transformation. Just digital was the furthest behind every function within businesses. The scope and expectation for HR roles is growing massively. So I'd always present this like chart that shows all the different functions in HR at the bottom. And then the next slide I would always show is a HR survey that showed that more than 60% of HR folks want to leave the function, not just change their job, but just get out of the function altogether. Maybe there's not a causation there, but I think there's a correlation behind it. When your
Bare
job
minimum.
just keeps getting harder and you don't have tools to make it easier, and you feel like you're always behind, it's going to make you want to do something else. It's going to burn you out. And this is actually something that's helping HR folks embrace and move forward proactively. And we're still early days. So, I mean, we're not, like you said, this new technology has been around and in use for a few years now. But in terms of adoption within HR as a function within enterprises, it's definitely still very early. So this is still a really good opportunity to lean forward, embrace it, do that with a cohort of people that are like-minded, that are learning together. And not only will you get exposure in a way that will help you on that journey, but you'll make some connections that you can share with and continue to help each other. And I think that community aspect of it, community, I think, is a term and an approach that's overused. But I think in this context, I think it's really, really critical, because the learning doesn't stop once the formal path is complete. It continues because the technology is changing all the time, and you can always be sharing and learning from each other as well. So all those pieces I think are great. Thanks for sharing them with our listeners. Yuri, it's always really, really fun talking to you. And I think what you create is really exciting. So thanks for the opportunity to share that with our listeners. We'll continue to stay in touch. And I encourage everybody to go check out all the things that you described, get in touch with you, follow you on LinkedIn directly. And hopefully we'll stay connected with those listeners as well through the newsletter and through the cohort. So we'll see you soon. Thanks again for joining me, Yuri.
Thank you very much, Tony. Really a pleasure always.